Hi guys, welcome to the daily analysis for today. I want to talk about a few things including the euro weakness that's in the market today and talk about the likelihood of that continuation, and also the USD yen breakout that we covered from a few weeks ago is starting to stall out, so I also want to talk about the likelihood of that continuing to higher prices or whether we should be on the lookout for a reversal. Let's first take a look at our news for tomorrow and cover our terms quickly, and then we can jump into these charts and take a look at the technical signs for the major pairs. Alright guys, so for news as far as tomorrow's concerned, there's a lot of stuff going on in the London session, which is typically stuff that I'm not paying attention to unless I have trades open during that session because I'm not entering new trades in that session. However, obviously if you have any euro or pound trades going on, there's major red tagged events in the early London session for that. And then later on in our New York session, we have 10 a.m. Canadian news, which is the main impact event for the New York session. Then later on in the afternoon, kind of a random time, we have the New Zealand dollar, and so we want to keep an eye on that one. That's 3 p.m. and it's an easy one to forget about because it's at that odd time. So if you happen to have New Zealand or Australian dollar trades open around 3 p.m., those can certainly be affected by that announcement. Okay, so those are the two major events that I'm going to be paying attention to. That's the CAD and the New Zealand news. Other than that, should be relatively quiet New York session, especially because there's no 8:30 a.m. news announcements whatsoever. Alright guys, so let's take a look at our terms next. And as you know, if you typically watch the daily analysis, the terms basically say that we're not registered or qualified or licensed by any special permission agency to give you investment advice. This is only an educational thing that we do for you, so please do not suggest that we are telling you what to do with your money or try to sue us if you make any bad trades. Alright, let's jump into those charts. Alright guys, so first we have the euro dollar up, and obviously the main thing to note here is the euro weakness. Starting Friday, we had a serious breakdown of euro weakness heading down. Now we're around the 127 area, so getting pretty close to this long-term trend line that's headed in the downward direction. Now this is an interesting reaction that we'll have to the trend line because it's not an upward trend line that it's bouncing off, but a downward trend line while it's heading down. So typically when that occurs, you can have a small bounce, but it's not normally a large bounce. It's not like a reversal bounce as if it was bouncing off a trend that was moving in the upward direction. Okay, so that should certainly affect price. You would tend to see price struggle around the trend line. However, I wouldn't expect a major reversal bounce just based on this trend line, because again, it's a trend line that's moving in the downward direction. So perhaps the best thing that we could expect as far as trend bouncing is continuation along that trend line slope. Now there is some horizontal resistance and some horizontal support and some other support that it's going to need to worry about. But as far as our major trend line, the one that we've really been talking about, because of these major areas that it's bounced on, I don't expect that to really act as a reversal sign for the euro dollar. Now, it can slow price down, it can bounce to some extent, but again, you want to keep an eye on the overall trend, and the most logical suggestion for price to do on this trend line is actually just to continue at this new slope toward lower prices, not really bounce up in a reversal pattern. Also keep in mind that this is a pretty clear break of this level, and these clear breaks do often tend to show continued momentum for a series of days and even weeks. So keep an eye on these components, and euro is certainly looking short as of now. Now, again, that's going to depend on the news and all the other things that we're going to find out about the euro dollar over the next few weeks. But as of right now, there's a strong momentum break and also long-term trend lines supporting the euro weakness. So that's the main thing to note there. Alright guys, next we have the pound dollar, and obviously I wasn't able to be here with you Friday, but we mentioned on Thursday that we had a big pin bar that was looking to be a fake out for the pound and looking to push price back down in the direction of this trend. And obviously there was massive follow through on that with Friday's bar and even more on today's daily bar. So pound is also looking very bearish. Now, one thing to keep in note with pound is that even though it is a downtrend and it's sloping toward the downside, it's actually getting less momentum filled because we're making some lower lows. So this is actually shallowing out. It'll be very interesting to see how low this goes before making another bounce toward the trend line to see if it actually increases the momentum of the downtrend and gets us back in line for an increasing downtrend, or if it stops short and starts turning back up before it makes another lower low like it did previously. In other words, the pound dollar is in a clear downtrend, but the downtrend is getting less and less steep each bounce that it makes toward the downward direction. So we're either going to see a continuation of that lessening, or we're going to see it break a lot more steeply, and we're going to get back in line with this very steep downtrend. Okay, so both of those are very obvious and clear possibilities, but depending on how it reacts, it's going to shape our view of the pound dollar over the next few weeks and next few months. So because of that, I would say that now is probably too late to get in short on the pound dollar. Even though there is momentum here, you don't know if this shallowing is going to continue and we're going to bounce right away, or if it's going to make that steeper low that we talked about. So I would say that as far as the pound dollar is concerned, you want to wait until it makes its low, bounces back up, and then look for a short on the next bounce, because it's probably a little late to get in now. In other words, the best thing that you can do right now is just wait for the next bounce rather than try to trade it at this point in time. Let's talk about that USD yen breakout that occurred a few weeks ago. Alright guys, so this is the USD yen. We tracked this breakout for quite some time. As price bounced in between here and got tighter, we were on the lookout for the breakout to either the upside or the downside. Obviously the breakout came to the upside. Kind of a fake first, a pullback, and then a very clear break the second time around toward the upside. Now, a little while ago we talked about this little pullback and to look for a continuation of the breakout, which we got. Now it's kind of stalling out like the USD yen typically does, giving us very indecisive small bars like it did yesterday, and kind of in the middle of this move right here as well. So that's what we want to avoid on the USD yen. Getting in trades with these small indecisive bars is not what we're looking to do. Typically we want something that looks more like this with 8, 10, 12 bars of the same color in a row. So with USD yen, it's going to be interesting to see if we get strong continuation of this pattern, or if we kind of get back into one of those cycles where it's just making very small bars kind of back and forth in a channeling direction like it did here, if you guys remember when we watched this for so long, and it was very frustrating to trade the USD yen. Okay, so this is a perfect time. It's in a very small pullback, to wait for it to test either this base here or even to come back down into this area here and look for a rebound for price in the upward direction. If we do get a strong pullback and an even stronger continuation, the USD yen can present a great opportunity to get back into the market and target these highs way up here in the 83 to 84 area, which of course is a huge trade for the USD yen. But the issue is waiting for the exact right area to enter the trade, and we'll be keeping tabs on that and following that very closely over the next few days to see how this pullback, how it pulls back, and then how it reacts to some of these major levels. That's going to be the crucial thing with USD yen, is timing that entry if the bullish sentiment continues. Speaking of pairs that typically are trapped in certain ranges, the AUD US dollar has been trapped for quite some time. And again, this is that move that we've been following, where we have this major level right in the middle of our wedge, and price has been bouncing off it and heading up towards the top level very consistently. Now this most recent leg from this middle area, obviously strong support and a consistent bounce, has been even more slow than other bounces. For instance, once we got this bounce, it was only a few bars before we were already near the top of the wedge. Here was pretty much the same thing. In this area, we've had smaller bars and pullbacks along the way, and it's making progress a lot more slowly. However, with that said, it still does look very strong in terms of consistency, because obviously we're making higher highs from this bottom on the way up towards this top wedge. So I'm still very confident in the ability for the AUD to get back up there, and there's nothing to make me believe that the AUD's not going to come back and test this wedge, the top of the wedge, because it's done so very consistently over the past few weeks, and actually the past few months really. So I'm still bullish, even though there's not great big momentum filled bars. I'm still bullish on the AUD US dollar, and I think that there's a very high probability that this thing's going to come back up and test the top of this wedge. So speaking of confidence, let's check out that Euro Pound that I was so confident about the bullish direction on that one. Okay, so the Euro Pound is moving up pretty consistently, over the past few months, and then right here we have our first major break. And if you remember, when I talked about this before, we had this bounce and it started this pullback, and I kind of just assumed that this was going to be a fake, a retest, and a continuation of this Euro Pound trend. However, we definitely had a clear break. It moved below that, and now price is officially opening new daily candles below our trend line, which is somewhat frustrating to me, because this was kind of the trend that I was relying on to continue. In my opinion, the most consistent daily trend we had in the market right now. So Obviously, price breaking below this is a little frustrating, and now it's a matter of whether this is going to be a strong break all the way to the downside, testing major lows of 70, 77 area, or if it's just a fake out to get people thinking like we are right now, and it's just a matter of time before it breaks back up above this trend line and continues this long-term trend. My sentiment's not really made up on that. Now that it's broken below, I'm starting to think twice about my suspicion of a continuation of the euro pound. And so again, this turns into one of those pairs that's just a waiting game. And obviously, for an intraday trader, that's not exactly the most fun thing, just to sit on these waiting pairs. But it's probably the best thing to do, because to wait for the highest probability trades, you need to see a lot of evidence. And right now, with euro pound just sitting below a trend line, not determine whether it's a breakdown because there's not a lot of momentum to the downside, or if it's a fake out, there's not a lot of high probability trades you can assume in that situation. So the euro pound just becomes a waiting game to see if it does in fact continue to lower prices and appear to be more of a breakdown, or if it's just a matter of time before it breaks back up to continue this upward trend. And of course, the verdict on that is yet to be seen, and we'll continue tracking that, and I will let you know when I see that if there is a more consistent verdict or a more obvious verdict, and we'll go from there. But for now, I think it's just a matter of waiting. And the last pair I want to talk about today, guys, is the EURAUD. And this is one that we don't typically cover on a daily basis, but something interesting is going on here, so I just wanted to alert you of that. Now, as you know, the EURAUD was in a pretty incredible reversal to the upside over the past several months. We talked about how many hundreds of pips this moved up and how quickly it did so. But what kind of happened at the top here was we started getting some of these reversal signs. They weren't completely concrete because we got bounces within them. And my overall expectation was that this might hang around here for a while, but eventually it's going to get up and test this long-term downtrend or this horizontal area, which we see here. I just kind of expected that EURAUD is eventually going to get there, and it's just a matter of waiting until it gets there and then looking for those short opportunities up at a higher price. But actually, EURAUD has made some pretty incredible ground over the past few weeks toward the bearish direction. You can see that we've moved about 480 pips now downward since this top peak. And most recently, we've broken the 38 fib level on this upward swing. Now, if I draw this, it depends on how you draw these levels, but let's draw it toward the lowest low for sure. And you can see that we're just below that on yesterday's daily close, if you consider this 38.2 a major level. And of course I do, because I think that on these major swings, the Fibonacci levels really come into play. So considering that it closed below here, to me, the EURAUD looks like a high probability of getting down to this 50 level next, and even perhaps breaking below that. So euro weakness and some odd consistency has definitely shown a pretty large reversal to the tune of 480 pips for the EURAUD, and that's one I definitely think is worth paying attention to. Alright guys, well that's about it for the daily analysis. Thanks so much for stopping by. As always, be sure to leave those comments or questions below, and I will get back to those and talk to you guys soon.